The Red Dead Redemption story is a tragic one in itself. You could say it somewhat has a good ending, but really it doesn't have one in reality, especially when you know what happens next. There are a lot of low moments throughout this game, but there are some which are more heartbreaking than others, and that's exactly what we're going through in today's video. Before we do get into the video, if you enjoy the content here and want to see a bit more from me, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every single week we are uploading the best videos around Rockstar games, which will involve lore and backstories like this one, or it could be the latest news and tutorials. So if you do want to stay up to date with everything Rockstar games, then make sure you are following the channel. Arthur being ill is not too difficult in itself. It starts in chapter 2 and it's a very slow process. With every mission that you go through, you start to notice it a bit more as Arthur is coughing more often. And you even start to see the color within cinematics, it starts to fade. And if you did go into the menu, eventually it does tell you that Arthur's condition is ill. The most heartbreaking moment out of all of this is once you do reach chapter 5, the mission called A Fork in the Road. This is the point in which Arthur gets diagnosed with TB. It starts with Arthur collapsing in the middle of Saint Denis, where he eventually wakes up and is being dragged down the street. Now the person dragging him is actually there to help him, trying to take him to the doctor's office, which is just around the corner. But even though it is just around the corner, it's a struggle to get there. Arthur does finally build up the strength to start walking, but it's really not good. You're in first person, everything is a bit fuzzy, and the people that you're walking past are just staring at you like you are something horrific. Still not yet being able to see Arthur's face. Eventually you do get to the doctor's office where the receptionist has the exact same response as everyone else, and then it finally happens. This is the point in which Arthur finally sits down in the chair, doctor looks at him, and despite looking how awful he does, completely slumped in the doctor's chair, the doctor still asks for payment first, and then he proceeds to do a checkup on Arthur. And it's at that point where you find out that he does have TB. For most people, the heartbreaking point is not the fact that Arthur's ill, but more in just the state that he's in, the condition. And it's definitely one of the toughest cinematics to go through. Molly OShea had a decent background. She was born into a wealthy family in Dublin, Ireland, and she came to the United States searching for adventure, eventually joining Dutch van der Ling and his game, and some point prior to 1899, she fell in love. She fell in love with Dutch. But from the very first moment that you speak to Molly, you see that her happiness is all on just one person. In Coulter, Arthur asks Molly if she would like to stay with the others for company, when Molly turns this offer down and says that Dutch is all the company she needs. Throughout the rest of the game, Molly can be found around the camp, but she never participates with any of the camp chores or activities. She's also the only character within the whole game where Arthur doesn't do a mission with. And whenever she does turn up into some of the cinematics, whether or not she's speaking to Arthur, Dutch, Uncle, or one of the other characters, she's always interrupted and pushed to the side, with that conversation never having a follow-up. As you progress through the story, she feels more and more like an outcast. You'll talk to her at the camp and she'll tell you how she needs to be alone, she's not much company, she's losing it. And after the point where Kieran and Sean both die, she actually becomes visibly hysterical at the camp, asking how any of this is okay, how people are able to cope with these conditions. And this just somewhat comes a negative feedback loop as she becomes more paranoid, so less people spend time with her, but then she gets more paranoid of why people are spending less time with her. Eventually, Molly does open up to one of her only friends within the camp. This is Abigail. She looks to her for advice on a relationship with Dutch, and Abigail quite simply states out that Molly is sweet but not stupid, and that she should realize that Dutch does not love her, at least not the way you want to be loved. And this is the point in which Molly just spiraled out of control. She became drunk more often than not, And finally, within the mission of That's Murphy country, that's where she lied to Dutch to get his attention, saying that she was the one that ratted when she didn't. And that resulted in Miss Grimshaw handling the situation, taking out Molly O'Shea, and it was all based on a lie just so she can get back at Dutch for all the pain and torture that Dutch put her through. Edith Downs is a supporting character featured within Red Dead Redemption 2. Her life starts out pretty normal, but unfortunately at a certain point, her and her husband Thomas had financial problems, and that's when they took out a loan with Leopold Strauss. They were unable to repay that loan, leading to Arthur Morgan being sent to the ranch by Strauss in hopes of forcing Thomas to repay his debt. And it was at this point where Edith's life completely changed, Thomas's life completely changed, as well as Arthur and the rest of the gang. This was the main changing point throughout the whole of Red Dead Redemption 2. But for Edith, she had it extremely rough. Soon after, her husband dies from TB. In turn, Strauss didn't wipe the debt, instead he just moved it over to Edith. She now would have to owe Strauss the money. Edith does somehow collect all of this money, in which Arthur does come back at a later date to collect the final payments. But it's at the exact same time that her and her son Archie are moving out of the house, trying to start a completely new life. But this wasn't the good life that they were initially hoping for. Edith and her son became financially unstable, resulting in Edith having to become a prostitute just to support herself and Archie. Edith and her son eventually have to move out of Saint Denis, and they move all the way up to Annesburg. It's at this point in which Archie now has to start working himself just to bring in some extra money, and he's working at the local mine, which is not doing well for him. And Edith is still a sex worker. She's still working the streets and trying to bring in as many clients as possible, which has really taken a toll on her. Arthur does come across Edith multiple times. He sees her as a prostitute within Saint Denis and nearly becomes one of her clients until she realizes who Arthur was. And later in Annesburg, you bump into Edith again, where she's with a client, notices Arthur, and just leaves Arthur as well as her client. The only real upside to Edith's story is that Arthur is trying to help her. Now, of course, wasn't helping her right at the beginning, but towards the end, where he does start to realize, and especially because he's ill at this point, he realizes all the bad that he's done. He tries to offer her money so that she can get out of her current situation, especially considering that Arthur's the one that put her where she currently is. But for Edith, she keeps on rejecting him. She rejects him every single time that Arthur offers until the very final moment, which is in Annesburg. This does have such a big impact on Arthur that it does eventually become one of the lines that he reflects on upon his final ride. The final ride is by far the most heartbreaking moment across the whole of the game. You know that it is coming towards the end of Arthur's story. You've just been given a load of information, finding out that Molly O'Shea wasn't the rat, so her death was pointless. You find out that instead it was Micah. You've just managed to save Abigail with Sadie Adler. You've got them out there, and now you're going back to confront the gang. As you're going back to the camp, this is the moment where Arthur reflects on everything that he's done. All the bad that he's done, everything that people have told them, and all the good that he's tried to do right towards the end, but he just feels like it isn't enough. You keep having flashbacks, particularly with some of the previous characters that we just met, such as Edith Downs, where she did have her life completely ruined just because Arthur, as well as Leopold Strauss and the Van der Linde gang, did try to collect as much money as possible from them by putting out these unsafe loans. What adds to all of this is the music that starts playing in the background, and it's been such an impactful moment that there's actually compilations and hundreds of videos where they show their reactions and they just break down and cry. Of course, eventually Arthur reaches the camp, confronts everything, the emotion does change again, but it does all come back again for two separate moments. The first one following this, of course, is when your horse goes down. The horse that you've had for pretty much the entirety of the game, it gets hit to the ground, and of course after taking out the Pinkertons, Arthur quickly rushes back to his horse. Even in the intense moment of trying to escape with John, Arthur still takes a second to comfort his horse in the final dying moments. This is also the part in which you're given a choice. You can either help John escape or you can go back for the money. And both of them have different endings depending on your honor. So there's 4 endings in total. But no matter which one you select, the ending is somewhat the same and it doesn't change how impactful it is. Of course, it is the final moments between Arthur, Dutch, and Micah. This mission is around 40 minutes long from the moment you start to the very end, and the whole thing is just an emotional roller coaster. It starts with action as you save Abigail, there's then a plot twist, you find out who is the real rat, it's then that sadness of the last ride, you then have that intense moment with the gang, and then it goes into a full-on gunfight between Arthur and John, the gang, and the Pinkertons. You finally manage to escape to another sad moment with your horse going down, to then eventually having to fight up onto the mountains or even going back to your camp depending on your ending, and then finally ends with another sad moment. It's an absolute emotional roller coaster and people loved it. They loved it but also hated it, and it's why it's one of the most heartbreaker moments, not just within Red Dead Redemption 2 but across most games. It's fun to play through, but at the exact same time there is not a winner out of any of this. But anyway guys, these are just some of the most heartbreaking moments within Red Dead Redemption 2. I did try to avoid the final ending because most people will probably include it, but you just have to. It just needs to be included within videos like this. If there's a moment which you think is more heartbreaking than the stuff that we've included within this video, then please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. But anyway guys, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did enjoy, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. But for now, I'm going. So see ya.